SYRIO Forel dies off screen. That is where it all begins. Martin brings the scene to a boiling point, showing a Kingsguard knight in full plate armor hacking through the fencing master's wooden sword. Then Arya runs away, and the chapter simply ends. Nobody, not a single word about what happened in that room after the door closed behind the girl. And a few chapters later, another man from the east appears by Arya's side. Also eerily calm, also seeing right through her, and this man knows how to change his face.
From this grows one of the most persistent theories in the fandom. SYRIO Forel didn't go anywhere. He simply took off one face and put on another, and Arya walked alongside him for 2 more books without ever suspecting it. Beautiful. Insanely beautiful. True. That is what we are going to verify today, honestly. Point by point, including the points that kill the theory.
First, let's establish the solid ground. Who is SYRIO Forel according to canon, without conjecture? He is a Bravo from Braavos, a master fencer who served as the first sword to the Sea Lord for 9 years. Martin describes him sparingly: short, bald, with a nose like a beak, wearing a leather vest. Ned Stark hires him to teach Arya not because he was looking for something exotic, but because the man had an excellent reputation, and the Braavosi style suited her thin blade better than Westerosi hacking. He teaches her with wooden swords with lead cores, runs her until she's bruised, and says things that will echo in her head for 5 books to come.
And here is a crucial detail that half the theory rests on. SYRIO does not teach Arya fencing, or rather, not just fencing. He teaches her to see. His most famous story from the book is about this. When the old first sword died, the Sea Lord summoned SYRIO, set a fat yellow cat on his lap, and asked him if he had ever seen such an animal. All the courtiers before him had marveled at the exotic beast from the edge of the world. Everyone saw a miracle, but SYRIO told the truth. He had seen 1,000 such cats in the Alice of Braavos. An ordinary cat, just fattened up on the master's table, with ears chewed up in fights. And by the way, it was a tomcat, not a she-cat, as the Sea Lord himself claimed.
That is exactly why they made him the first sword, not for the speed of his hand, but because he was the only one in the room who looked with his eyes, not with his expectations. From this same scene grew the character's main formula. The heart lies, the head plays tricks on us, but the eyes see the truth. Look with your eyes, listen with your ears, feel with your skin, and think later. He would tie a black silk blindfold over her eyes and force her to spin and tumble. He taught her about fear. Fear cuts deeper than swords, and he who fears to lose has already lost. He told her a phrase that is perhaps more important than all the others. Boy, girl, you are a sword, that is all. Remember that phrase. We will come back to it, and when we do, it will sound completely different.
Now, his final scene. Robert is dead, Ned is arrested, and Cersei gives the order to capture or kill all the Starks in the Red Keep. Sir Meryn Trant comes for Arya with 5 guardsmen. Syria puts the girl behind him and asks the only correct question. Why are Lannister men being sent for Lord Stark's daughter? Then, with a wooden stick, he dispatches 5 armed men, which, if you think about it, is an achievement of legendary proportions in itself. And then he faces a knight in white armor. Martin explicitly highlights the contrast. A man encased in metal from head to toe with real steel in his hand against a man in the leather vest with a piece of wood. Trant remarks that the dancing master is fast.
SYRIO replies that the knight is slow. The 4th strike shears the wooden sword in half, lead core and all. SYRIO tells Arya to run, and that is that.
In the show, the scene is almost word for word the same. Only a line is added that has gone down in history.
The first sword of Bravos does not run. Plus, the show earlier put into his mouth that very formula about the only God, whose name is death, and the only answer to him, not today. In the book, this thought is presented more briefly and dryly. The famous expanded version belongs to the screenwriters, and that is worth keeping in mind because the theory largely grew out of the show's presentation. Afterward, in both the book and the show, SYRIO simply vanishes from the narrative. Arya believes him dead and adds Trant to her list. But here's what's interesting. She didn't see anything herself.
И есть еще один факт канона, который фанаты обожают. В третьей книге, именно в разговоре с Серси и Тирионом, королева объясняет, что у нее нет младшей Старк, и никогда не было. Она послала Мэрина Транта за ней, но ее патетический танцевальный учитель вмешался, и девочка сбежала. Обратите внимание на формулировку. Королева не говорит, что учитель был убит. Она не сообщает ничего о его судьбе вообще. Для королевы это тривиальная деталь, неудобства, не стоящие воспоминания. Но для читателя это единственное упоминание судьбы SYRIO во всех 5 книгах, и оно пусто.
Now for the second half of the picture. Jaqen H'ghar. What is known about him for certain? He appears in the first book in literally one line, as one of the 3 prisoners Yoren takes from the black cells of the Red Keep for the Night's Watch. The other 2 are Rorge and Biter, that is, a company of absolute thugs. Jaqen introduces himself as a sellsword from the free city of Lorath, and speaks of himself in the third person, never using the word I. He is polite, and so dangerous that Yoren, a hardened man, keeps all 3 in a cage on a wagon and doesn't unchain them even under threat of fire. Then you remember the rest. Arya throws them an axe, they survive, then they resurface at Harrenhal on the side of the Lannisters. Jaqen finds her at night and says she stole 3 deaths from the Red God, which means she must give 3 names in return. Chiswick, Whis, and the third name, with which Arya corners him, naming him himself to force him to help her retake the castle. And when the work is done, he does something before her eyes that no one else in this world does. He changes his face. His cheeks become fuller, his eyes closer together, a hooked nose appears and the scar on his right cheek, while his red and white hair turns into a mop of black curls. He gives her an iron coin, teaches her the words Valar Morgulis, and leaves.
And here, the canon provides something that the community passed long ago and almost unanimously. In the prologue of the 4th book, a man arrives in Old Town, whom the novice Pate calls the alchemist. Martin's description matches Jaqen's new face almost word for word. A young, ordinary face, full cheeks, a hooked nose, a faint scar on his right cheek, thick black curls around his ears. The alchemist gives Pate a gold dragon. Pate bites the coin out of habit, and a minute later his heart stops. In exactly the same way, with a poisoned coin, a faceless man apprentice kills her target in the 5th book, and then Pate walks around the citadel as if nothing happened.
This is no longer just a theory, it is almost a consensus. Jaqen took Pate's face and for some reason infiltrated the heart of Westeros' scholarly world. So, here is our solid ground. SYRIO disappeared without confirmation of death, Jaqen exists, changes faces, and knows how to become anyone. Both are connected to Arya, both are connected to the East. Now the territory of conjecture begins, and I will honestly note every time we step off the canon onto the ice. The first clue lies on the surface, everyone mentions it, and that is exactly why it must be examined especially thoroughly, because it might turn out to be not evidence, but an optical illusion.
Clue number 1 sounds simple. Martin did not show the death, and that is true. And it is a truth stranger than it seems at first glance. The thing is, Martin is usually very meticulous about deaths. He buries even secondary characters out loud. Someone finds the body, Someone brings news, someone remembers, someone gloats. Septa Mordain is killed in that same massacre, and her head is later shown to Sansa on the wall. Jory Castle, Heward, Weil, all of Stark's men in the capital get their lines. But the man who single-handedly took apart 5 guardsmen and faced a Kingsguard knight dissolves into thin air without a single obituary.
To see the figure of Meryn Trant, Martin spent quite a bit of effort explaining to us. This man is a mediocrity. Barristan Selmy, when he is dismissed from the King's Guard, drops a line about how he would have cut through 5 of his former brothers easily. Bronn calls Trant a maggot in fancy armor to his face, someone better at hitting little girls than fighting men. Sandor Clegane puts it even more bluntly. Any street urchin with a sword would have laid out 3 Meryn Trants. That this, the author systematically lowers this knight's combat reputation to the very bottom. Why? If Trant is just supposed to kill a fencing meister, why emphasize so many times that he's no fighter at all?
The logic of the theory from here is straightforward. SYRIO was the best blade in Braavos. The worst blade of the Kingsguard came out against him. Trant's only advantage was his armor and real steel. But SYRIO had already shown by that point what he does to armed men with a stick. And he looked at the fight with his eyes, not his hopes. He understood perfectly well that you cannot pierce armor with a wooden stick. Therefore, if he didn't intend to die, he had only one option, not to win, but to leave. And that is where supporters of the theory say it gets interesting. The man who knows how to become no one leaves the room not as SYRIO Forel.
Now for an honest check. Is there a simpler explanation? There is, and it is unpleasantly convincing. We read this scene through Arya's eyes. She runs away. Everything she could physically take with her is the image of a broken sword. Martin is not hiding Syrio's death, he simply cannot show it because the camera left with the girl. This is not a mystery, it is a limitation of the point of view. And there are dozens of such places in the saga. We don't see what happened to half the inhabitants of the Tower of the Hand. And no one builds theories that Ned Squire became a faceless man.
Furthermore, the "run, I'll hold them off" motif is not a hint at survival, but one of the oldest tropes in literature, and it works precisely because the one who stays behind dies. The hero's mentor must die, otherwise the hero will not begin to grow up. Arya loses SYRIO, then loses her father, then loses Yoren, then loses everything else. And each time the world takes away someone who could have protected her. If SYRIO survived, and moreover had been nearby the whole time, the entire structure of her loneliness crumbles. And loneliness is the foundation upon which her entire arc is built.
И третий контраргумент, самый прозаичный. Отсутствие конфирмации не является доказательством того, что он и не скончался. Это классическая когнитивная ловушка. Раз мне не сообщили о смерти учителя танцев, значит он жив. Но Мартин пишет от первого лица, а не ведет хроники. Серси не сообщает Тириону о судьбе танцевального мастера, потому что ей это не важно. Для нее он не именной столпресс, который помешал ей захватить ребенка.
So, my assessment of this lead is as follows. It is real, but weak. It's not evidence, it's a hole in the text. Holes in a text can be doorways, or they can just be holes, and you can't tell the difference by looking at one hole alone. If the theory had nothing but the absence of a body, we could close this conversation right now. But it has something else. And the next lead is much more unpleasant for skeptics, because it concerns not the plot, but what both characters say, and words in Martin's work are never accidental.
The second lead is philosophy, and this is where coincidences stop being coincidences in terms of sheer volume. SYRIO teaches Arya to see the truth beneath the appearance.
The faceless men teach Arya to create an appearance over the truth. It is the same discipline, just from different sides of the table. Moreover, the specific exercises are eerily similar. SYRIO blindfolds her and forces her to move in the dark. 3 books later, the kindly man will truly blind her and force her to live in darkness, learning to hear and feel. SYRIO says that the heart lies and the head deceives. The faceless men train her to recognize lies by the face and teach her to lie herself.
It goes further. Remember that phrase we set aside in the first chapter. Boy, girl, you are a sword, and that is all. SYRIO erases her gender, her name, her origin, and leaves only the function. And now listen to how that sounds in the House of Black and White. Who are you? No one. The girl has no name. The girl has no desires. It is literally the same operation performed on a child's personality, only taken for a religious absolute. SYRIO began the work that the priests of the many-faced God later continued. And it doesn't matter at all whether he did it consciously or not. The effect is the same. By the time Arya arrives at the temple, she is already half-trained.
And the third layer is religion. SYRIO tells her that there is an essence, only one God, and his name is death. And the only thing one says to this God is not today. The faceless men say there is one God, and his name is the many-faced God, and the only thing one says to him is Valar Morghulis. All men must die. These are 2 halves of the same thesis. One half resists, the other submits. And Arya spends the whole journey darting right between them. She accepts the gift of the faceless men while simultaneously refusing to be no one.
Proponents of the theory add a linguistic argument here. Both characters constantly repeat the same catchphrase, just so. They say that a coincidence in speech habits is the author's signature. And this is where the theory takes its first serious hit, because this argument falls apart at the first check. The fact is, it's not just SYRIO who says this. Thoros of Myr, Salador San, Illyrio Mapatis, Captain Groleo, and from time to time even Daenerys, who picked up Eastern turns of phrase, all say it. It's an idiom of the free cities, a regional linguistic marker, not a fingerprint of a specific person.
To claim a kinship between characters based on this is like claiming 2 people are the same person because they both say like or you know.
Moreover, the speech mannerisms of SYRIO and Jaqen do not match. They directly contradict each other. Jaqen refers to himself exclusively in the third person, this man, this one. And this isn't an authorial invention for the sake of mystery. In the world of Ice and Fire, it is explicitly explained that among the nobility in Lorath, it is considered indecent to speak of oneself directly. It is a remnant of the cult of the blind god, which died out over 1,000 years ago, but the speech habit remained. In other words, Jaqen's manner is an accurate Lorathi accent. But SYRIO speaks of himself in the third person quite differently, and not always. He pronounces his name with pride, like a brand, like a title. For 9 years, SYRIO Forel was the first sword of the Sea Lord. He knows such things.
This is the speech of a man who has a name and a reputation. Jaqen's speech is the speech of a man who erases his name. And at this point, it must be said aloud. Specifically in the philosophy section, the theory, to be honest, loses to a more boring explanation. Martin builds SYRIO as Arya's first touchpoint with Braavos. He shows us the city through a man before he shows us the city itself. The thematic echo between the fencing master and the death priests is not there to hide a plot twist, but so that the reader, upon reaching the House of Black and White, feels she has already been here once. It is architecture, not a hidden cache.
But wait before closing the tab, because next comes the lead that gave birth to the theory in the first place. And it is the only point where the proponents have a real trump card regarding timing. And at the same time, it is the only place where the theory can be buried with a single paragraph from the first book.
The coincidence in timing looks perfect. Syrio disappears from the narrative, and almost immediately, literally a few chapters later, Jaqen appears next to Arya. No gap. One mentor from the east leaves, another mentor from the east arrives, and he arrives not by chance, but specifically to her. Out of the entire wagon of criminals, he is the only one who speaks to her politely, the only one who immediately figures out that Arya is a girl, and the only one who later gives her a coin that will lead her to Bravos. If you were writing a detective story, you would place this junction exactly like that.
And here is the second detail that proponents love. In the show, Jaqen first appears after Ned's execution, sitting in a cage on the Yoren's wagon. How he got there is not shown to the viewer at all. He's just there. For someone who has only watched the show, the picture comes together perfectly. Syrio fights Trant, the screen cuts away, then, chronologically, a mysterious guy who can change faces appears. There is no gap. Nothing prevents connecting these 2 points with a single line. And this, by the way, explains why the theory is so popular among viewers rather than readers.
And now let's open the book. And the book cuts this line, doing so with one short episode that almost no one keeps in mind. In the first book, there is a scene where Yoren, the Night's Watch recruiter, asks the small council for men. The knights are silent. No one volunteers, and then Ned Stark, as Hand of the King, allows him to choose recruits from the royal dungeons. Yoren goes down into the black cells and takes 3 people, Rorge, Biter, and Jaqen Hagar. And now compare this with the situation upstairs. Ned is still Hand at this moment. He is still alive, not yet arrested, still making plans to send his daughters north, and is even planning to take the fencing master with him.
That is, during these very days, SYRIO is walking around the Red Keep and putting Arya through her paces in the small hall. And during these very days, Jaqen is already sitting in a black cell 2 floors below the same castle. This is not a minor inconsistency. This is a physical impossibility. One person cannot simultaneously give lessons to a girl in a tower and rot in a dungeon 2 floors below. And note, we are not talking about some common dungeon, but specifically the black cells, the very bottom where the worst of the worst are kept. Rorge and Biter are not pickpockets, they are monsters. Arya later reflects on this herself. Yoren found Jaqen in a black cell, which means he did something truly terrible to be transported in chains.
Can this be twisted in favor of the theory? One could try. The logic would be that it costs a faceless man nothing to arrange his own arrest if he needs to get to a certain place, and the black cells are an excellent starting position to leave for the north with a caravan without raising questions. The problem is that this move doesn't save the chronology. Even if he sat there voluntarily, he was still sitting there while SYRIO was alive and in plain sight. This means these are 2 different bodies in the same city at the same time. And this means the strict version of the theory, where SYRIO literally took off his face and turned into Jaqen, doesn't work.
There is, of course, the option of 2 faceless men. And this one, unlike the strict version, cannot be disproven. Nothing prevents the Order from having 2 agents in the capital at once. Nothing prevents SYRIO from being connected to the House of Black and White without being Jaqen. This, by the way, is the most resilient form of the theory, and it was believed by, for example, the actress who played Arya. She mentioned in an interview that she was convinced how Fencing Master was alive and somehow connected to the Faceless Men until the showrunners told her in no uncertain terms that he was dead. The show's writer confirmed the same thing.
But statements from the show's creators are a separate category of evidence, and one must handle them carefully. Firstly, they are talking about the show, not the books, and Arya's book arc is noticeably longer and more complex. Secondly, the actor who played Jaqen recalled that he almost believed this theory himself, until he met the actor who played SYRIO in person at a convention and saw for himself that they were 2 different people. It sounds like a joke, but in essence, it is the only argument that can be presented. They were played by two different people, and no one tried to deceive us with editing.
So let's record the interim summary. The coincidence in timing, which looked like the theory's main trump card, turns into its main problem when checked against the book. The strict version is dead. The soft version is alive and even perhaps healthy. And now, with the main structure dismantled, it is time to bring out the lead that almost no one talks about. It doesn't prove that SYRIO is alive. It proves something else, and perhaps something more interesting. Martin is not done with this surname.
In 2014, Martin released a sample chapter from The Winds of Winter, titled Mercy. Arya is in Bravos. She is playing in a troupe of mummers. She has a new name and a new role, and she is preparing to go on stage. And here's a detail that almost everyone glosses over. The play she's performing in is called The Bloody Hand, and it was written by a man named SYRIO. It is said of him that he has the bloodiest pen in all of Bravos. His first play is also mentioned, about the destruction of the Rhoynar under the dragons of Valyria. The saga's wiki honestly notes, the degree of SYRIO's kinship with SYRIO is unknown.
Let's break down why this even matters. Martin could have named the playwright anything. There are dozens of names in Bravos. He invents them by the dozen. But in the chapter where Arya learns to be a mummer, that is, learns to professionally pretend to be someone else, the playbill bears the surname of her first teacher, the very same man who taught her to see through pretense. This is either a very lazy reuse of a name or a deliberately placed echo. From an author who plans his plots decades in advance, I'd bet on the latter.
And the thematic rhyme here is simply excellent. SYRIO taught her to distinguish what is real from what is not. SYRIO makes a living by making the unreal convincing. And between them, literally on stage, stands a girl who is learning both at the same time. She wears other people's faces in the temple and other people's roles in the theater. And both professions turn out to be the same craft. If Martin wanted to use a single surname to remind the reader where it all began for Arya, he chose the perfect place.
But let's put this to the test. First counter-argument. Forel could simply be a common Bravasi surname. Martin's world is full of people with the same last name, and no one assumes all Florence or Freys are secretly connected. Second counter-argument. Fario is a playwright, not a fighter, and there are no hints in the text that he is a master of the blade or linked to the order. Third counter-argument. The most boring and most significant. The play The Bloody Hand itself is a parody of events in Westeros. It features a fat king, a boy king, a queen, and a demonic dwarf. Martin is playing with Shakespeare and rewriting his own plot as urban gossip. The playwright's surname could just be a garnish for that joke.
And yet, one thing keeps me up at night. Martin brought back the surname Forel at the exact moment when Arya is at the maximum distance from her true self. She is not Arya, she is Mercy. She washes away her hair, shaves her head for a wig, and plays a girl who is killed in the plot. And it is on this very evening that she encounters and kills Roth, one of the men on her list. Meaning, for the first time in a long while, she acts as Arya Stark, not as no one. The surname of the teacher who once told her, "You are a sword, and that is all," surfaces exactly on the border between these two versions of her. Things like that don't surface in Martin's work by accident.
Now let's hit the brakes for a second and look at the whole picture from above, because we've gone far enough to see it. We have a man whose death is not confirmed by a single witness. We have an order that knows how to take faces from the dead and wear them for years. We have a girl whom this order for some reason accepted, trained, and let go, which is actually unprecedented. And we have a surname that keeps popping up in the text after its bearer supposedly died. If you line all this up, you get a very coherent story. The only question is whether this is the story Martin is writing or if we're filling in the blanks ourselves.
And this is where it's time to ask the uncomfortable question that proponents of the theory usually sidestep. Not could SYRIO have been a faceless man, but why would a faceless man do this? Because the rules of the order, which Martin has written out in quite some detail, work against the theory much harder than any chronology.
Let's start with the simplest part. The faceless men do not kill at their own whim and do not work for free. Their service is monstrously expensive, and the price is measured in more than just gold. They take everything that is valuable to the person. For them, murder is a gift, a religious act, and they grant it only to those who have asked or those for whom it has been paid. Personal motives are strictly forbidden. Arya learns this the hard way when she kills the singer Darion. Driven by a personal grudge, she is punished with blindness. In the show, she receives the same punishment for killing Meryn Trent because it was her revenge, not an assignment from the Order. Now apply these rules to SYRIO's biography. For 9 years, he serves as the first sword to the Sea Lord. This is not a secret position. It is a public figure, a man known to the entire city. Then he ends up in King's Landing with such a good reputation that the Hand of the King hires him to teach his daughter. And then, for several months, he puts the child through her paces daily, corrects her form, explains his philosophy, and ultimately dies, or at the very least takes a mortal risk, defending her from the Kingsguard. At no point in this chain is there a contract, a payment, or a gift of death. There is only a man doing his job, and at a critical moment, doing more than he is required to do.
Next is the question of faces. The faceless men wear the faces of the dead. They are removed, processed, and stored in the Hall of Faces. Thousands of faces on the dungeon walls. Jaqen gets Pate's face by killing Pate. Arya gets the face of the disfigured girl who came to the temple to die. This means that for someone to walk around King's Landing under the name SYRIO Farrell, a dead SYRIO Farrell would have to have been lying somewhere. And this dead SYRIO would have had to have been famous enough to have been the first sword of Braavos for 9 years. Such an identity cannot be concocted on the fly for a one-off assignment. It cannot be faked or built quickly.
A cover that requires 9 years of public service in the eyes of an entire city is the most inefficient cover imaginable.
У этого контраргумента есть и обратная сторона, и ради справедливости о ней надо сказать. Если предположить, что Орден зачем-то хотел иметь своего человека близко к рулителю Браавоса, то 9 лет службы перестают быть абсурдностью и становятся операцией. В самом Браавосе отношения города и дома Черного и Белого описываются как довольно натянутые. Город терпит Орден, но не любит его. Гипотетический шпион в должности первого меча в такой ситуации выглядит логичным. Но, буду честна, это голые домыслы. Ни одного намека на такую операцию в тексте нет. Мы просто придумали мотив для Ордена, потому что теории он требовался.
And here's the main plot-based argument against it, which for me outweighs everything else. If SYRIO were a faceless man, his entire scene with Meryn Trent is devalued. The point of that scene is not that a fencing instructor is cool. The point is that a man who could have simply walked away stays and dies for someone else's child, armed with a wooden practice sword, knowing that a wooden sword cannot pierce armor. It is one of the few scenes in the first book where someone acts nobly and it doesn't look foolish. If he is actually an immortal shapeshifter who will peel off his face a page later and go about his business, then he sacrificed nothing. He just finished his shift. And this also breaks Arya. Her entire arc is built on the fact that the world consistently takes away everyone who protected her. SYRIO, her father, Yoren, her mother, her brother, the Hound. Each loss pushes her a step closer to the Temple of Death.
If it turns out that the first loss was a setup and the teacher was walking alongside her and watching over her the whole time, her journey turns from a tragedy into a foster program. She ceases to be a person who survived on her own and becomes a person who was guided. Martin doesn't treat his characters like that, and that perhaps is the strongest defense of the canon.
Now, let's assemble the theory in its entirety, in the form where it holds up best, and see what we get. Because after all the checks, it didn't leave us with nothing. It left us with quite a lot, just not what we started with.
If you put together everything that stood the test, the story looks like this. The House of Black and White was interested in the Starks, or Arya specifically, long before she knew the Order existed. In King's Landing, during the same period, there is at least one faceless man sitting in a black cell, and a man from Braavos who teaches the Hand's daughter Braavosi techniques, including exercises suspiciously similar to an acolyte's training. When the capital explodes, the first mentor disappears without a trace, and the second immediately takes the vacated spot, recognizes the girl under a false name, grants her 3 favors, hands her a pass to Braavos, and disappears himself, leaving her on a road that leads exactly where he wanted.
In this formulation, the theory ceases to be a fairy tale about the resurrection of a beloved character and becomes a question of how coincidental Arya's biography really is. And in this form, it holds up very strongly. Because Arya's path from Winterfell to the House of Black and White really does look too straight to be a coincidence. Needle gifted by her brother, a teacher who scrubs her floors and her name, a coin received from an assassin, a ship to Braavos, a temple where she's let in even though she shouldn't be. Too many steps, and they all lead to the same door.
And now let's assume for a minute that the strict version is true, despite the chronology. What changes in what we've read? The main thing changes. The lesson about the Sea Lord's cat turns into a confession. A man tells a child that eyes see the truth, and one must look at what is there, not at what is being shown to you, all while standing before her in a borrowed face. That would be one of the cruelest jokes Martin ever put on the page. The teacher of true sight as the biggest deception in the room. And, characteristically, Arya, the best student of that lesson, the only one in the entire saga who sees through faces time and again, would not have seen the one who stood closest of all.
What would this mean for the Winds of Winter? In the book line, Arya is currently in Braavos. She wears other people's faces, plays other people's roles, and is reclaiming her name piece by piece. She has already broken the Order's rules twice, and she has gotten away with it twice, which is strange in itself. If she has someone in the Order looking out for her, all of this stops being a quirk and becomes a plot. And then the return of the surname Forel to the playbill is not a garnish, but an announcement.
But let's not kid ourselves. This beautiful construction has one vulnerable spot, and it is fundamental. Everything rests on silence. Remove the silence, insert one line into the text stating that the Braavosi's body was found in the small hall, and nothing will remain of the theory, not a single piece of evidence, because all the other points are rhymes, not facts. A theory that lives only on the absence of information is always vulnerable to the appearance of information, and that must be acknowledged out loud. We've put the puzzle together. We've looked at it from one side and the other. All that remains is to do what made breaking this down worth it in the first place: call things by their names and evaluate how plausible this theory actually is.
Let's start with a scale so I don't have to hide behind vague words. I rate the strict version, where SYRIO Forel and Jaqen H'ghar are literally the same person, as beautiful, but unlikely. Not impossible, just unlikely. And the main reason isn't their character or philosophy, but the black cells.
As long as the text contains the episode where Nad, still alive and still hand of the king, gives Yoren the right to choose men from the dungeons, and Jaqen is already sitting in those dungeons, the strict version requires too many explanations. A good theory explains the text. A bad theory forces the text to make excuses.
The second version, where SYRIO simply survived but never became Jaqen, I honestly rate as 50-50. In its favor is the complete lack of confirmation of his death and the persistent downplaying of Marintrant's combat skills. Against it is the logic of the scene, the character's nature, he himself said the first sword of Braavos does not run, and the general economy of the narrative. A resurrected mentor who never appears again throughout 4 books is a Chekhov's gun that doesn't fire.
Третья версия, где Сирио связан с домом Черного и Белого, не будучи Якином, я считаю более вероятной. Его методология слишком хорошо соответствует программе подготовки аколитов. Человек из Ордена появляется возле студента в самый подходящий момент. И, к слову сказать, это единственная версия, которая ничего не нарушает, не отрицает его жертвы, одиночества Арии или драматизма первой книги. Просто добавляется скрытый слой.
Now for the authorial lens. That is, whether such a twist fits Martin's style. And here the answer is twofold, which is interesting in itself. On one hand, identity swapping is his favorite toy. Theon becomes Reek, Sansa becomes Elaine, John Connington becomes Griff, a faceless man becomes the acolyte Pate. Martin loves hiding people inside other people. On the other hand, there is a pattern. He always leaves a physical signature. A scar on the right cheek, a hooked nose, black curls, an eye color that doesn't match. A reader who rereads carefully is bound to find a clue in the description, and it is always there.
But between SYRIO and Jaqen, there is no such signature. None at all. SYRIO is short, bald, with a nose like a beak. Jaqen is handsome, with long hair, half red and half white, and Arya specifically notes this two-toned color. Not a single shared physical detail, not a single recurring gesture, not a single slip of the tongue. And for me, this is the decisive argument regarding Martin's style. Martin doesn't hide solutions so that they can't be found upon rereading. He hides them so that they stand out upon rereading. Here, upon rereading, the opposite stands out.
What could settle the question once and for all? Not much, and that's worth mentioning too. One line in The Winds of Winter about the fate of the Braavosi from the Red Keep. One mention of the name Forel in the context of the Order. One episode where Arya recognizes a face in the Hall of Faces. Any of these things would end the debate in a second. And to be honest, I rate the probability of Martin returning to this name higher than the probability of the character himself returning.
And one last thing that must be said. There is a version that explains the popularity of this theory better than any of the clues combined. And it isn't about Westeros. Syrio Forel appears in 3 episodes of the first season and is more memorable than half of the characters who live through 8 seasons. He dies before anyone we learn to love, dies pointlessly off screen protecting a child, and doesn't even get a line of an obituary. The theory that he returned under a different face is a way to undo that injustice, and hands on heart, that is exactly why it has lived for 25 years, not because someone found an ironclad clue in the text.
So I will say it plainly without neutrality. I believe Syrio Forel died in that room and that Jaqen H'ghar is a different person. The chronology with the black cells leaves no chance for the strict version, the lack of physical matches contradicts the author's style, and most importantly, Syrio's death carries too much weight for Morton to undo it. But I don't consider the topic closed. The connection between Arya's first teacher and the order that became her second teacher is too tight to be a coincidence, and the name Forel will return to the text. It's just that most likely it won't return the way the fans want.
And that is the main irony of this story. We have spent 25 years looking for proof in the text that the man who taught Arya to see the truth was himself a deception. We look at an empty space in the narrative and see a hidden layer, a secret agent, a masked face. We are doing exactly what he warned against. Remember that room in Bravos, where the courtiers looked at an ordinary fat cat and saw a wondrous beast from the edge of the world? They weren't lying, they just really wanted the cat to be a miracle. And Martin, who writes nothing by accident, placed that scene in the first book long before there was any reason for series.
Сирио Форел научил девочку одному – смотреть глазами, а не тем, что внутри тебя. Сердце лжет, разум играет игры, но глаза видят есть то, что есть. И если применить этот урок к самой долгоиграющей теории о нем, то ответ будет неприятен, но честен. Кот обыкновенный, просто раскормили его нашей любовью к персонажу. Но глаза, как учил Сирио, нужно держать открытыми, ведь Мартин еще не дописал. А история, в которой все ответы уже известны, не удерживала бы внимания в течение стольких лет. Напишите в комментариях, что вы думаете. Устоялась ли теория или разрушилась? И был ли какой-то ключ, который мы следовало проанализировать, но этого не сделали? И подпишитесь, чтобы не пропустить следующую разбортовку.